Life isn't perfect, and neither are we.
Nope. But we know how to face our fears
And have some fun.
and talk about all the messiest things of life.
Like the messiest things.
Get connected to yourself, get connected to others, and get connected to the life right in front of you.
This is The Connected Life with Justin and Abby.
That's me.
That's you.
And you.
Hey, friends, before we kick off this week's episode, we got a little surprise for you.
Yeah, we are doing a conference on boundaries for free. We want to invite you.
What?
I know. We want to invite you to come learn about boundaries while we have none. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But we want you to be able to be a part of it. We have a school, the Life Consulting Masterclass. It's a 3-year program. And every year we do conferences where there's a deep dive on different subjects. And this year we're inviting you to join the school for the conference on boundaries.
Yeah,
it'll
come
be
hang out.
interactive. It'll be fun. It'll be empowering.
Yeah, it's going to be a really good time. And it's October 18th and the 19th, Friday and a Saturday. All you have to do is go to Justin and Abby, that's abi.com/boundaries. And you can get all the extra details there. You can sign up for it. We'll send you a little something in your email. And check your spam.
You have to respond. You have to get the email and
Yeah.
respond to it to be able to come. Because
Yeah.
last time, all the links got lost in spam.
Yeah. So go check out that spam folder if you don't find it right away after you hit send.
Yeah.
Okay?
Okay.
So, hey, without further ado, here's the episode you're wanting to watch.
This has been such a good series with Jenna, and I love it so much. I love the concept of boundaries, mostly because boundaries are how I learned to not be a crazy person with other people. Like it made me a better person.
Yeah.
I had to set boundaries so that I didn't get angry or explode or get dysregulated or have anxiety. And so boundaries really helped my mental health. And when I learned about them for me, not for like, these are the rules you're supposed to do, or it really helped me. Anyway, I'm excited about the podcast series we've done. And we're actually going to do a free boundaries conference.
Yeah.
So if you are listening to this and you're like, I need help, I need more information than this, we're going to be giving that to you on.
You can go to Justin and Abby, that's abi.com/boundaries to find out more about that. That's going to be October 18th and the 19th. It's going to be some fun times.
Yeah. We're going to let you join the life consulting, the school that we have.
Yeah, we run our life consulting masterclass.
And so we do conferences during the school, and you can be a part of that for free. This one time, you'll want to do it.
Just
So
have to go
sign up. You have to make sure that you get their email response and it doesn't go to your spam.
Yep. Check your spam if you sign up. And without further ado, we're jumping back into this conversation with Jenna, having conversations about boundaries. I love your conversations about boundaries. You're so well articulated about it. It makes me rethink about how I could be participating in boundaries better. And this is a fun episode to me because we're going to have a dialogue with you about helping your kids set boundaries with them and teach them about boundaries in their life. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think, boundaries as a parent is so important because kids are very dysregulating. They do a million things push past what your autonomy and what you want and need. And so if you don't have boundaries, you actually have to explode or disconnect or get on your phone and scroll for hours. Like you have to do coping mechanisms that affect your kids if you don't have boundaries with them. And so boundaries is the best way to love them. And I think you are one of the most well-balanced parents because there's so many people that are raising their kids where they like value all of their feelings, but kind of become coddling to their feelings. And then all of the previous generation that was like, shove those feelings in a bucket and you'll do what I say. And we've seen that both of these are causing a lot of chaos. We have a new generation that is being raised without emotional distress tolerance because their parents are just doing whatever they can to make them happy and they're never having to face boundaries. And boundaries are a part of adult life. And so if you haven't learned them in your family, it's really scary to become an adult.
Yeah.
So you have that balance of both. I feel very excited to talk to you about it. So,
and the last thing I want to say is for people who are listening, when you get to hear from a mom or a parent that does these things in a very healthy and whole way, it's actually very repairing for you. So even if you don't have kids, listening to this episode and allowing yourself to be like, okay, what did I need as a kid? And I'm going to let this experience of hearing from another mom who does this well, just reparent me inside of my own soul.
I feel like I'm already listening and learning. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to have to talk in a second. I'm like, yes.
Yes. So let's just talk about a few of the ways that the things that concepts that you have boundaries on in your family with your kids.
Okay. Yeah. So first off, I have an 11-year-old, an 8-year-old, a newly 8-year-old, and then a 5.5-year-old.
Aww.
So they're very cute. And like you said, I think you learn boundaries. It's like the grace that if you learn them when you're single, awesome. And then you get married and you get triggered on another level
100%.
And you're like, okay, I got to get better at this.
Completely.
And then you become a parent. And then with every child, you're like, woo!
Yes.
So that is where I'm at, the woo end of the boundaries. So I think for us with boundaries, as we're like healing, having a value for our heart and our emotions as like individuals, as a married couple before we had kids, realizing like, oh, we want to do that. Like we want to help them connect with their hearts so that they're not learning this as adults retroactively. But in doing that, then realizing like, oh, they have their brains are not fully developed. No. So it is not the same as doing boundaries with another individual.
Adult.
Yes, another adult who technically, theoretically, their brain should be fully developed. But like realizing like, oh, so where is like almost like the spectrum that we want to land of we hear your emotions and we're a house that teaches you like there's a value for emotions, but they're messages. They are not absolute truth. And then what we do with the emotions that we unpack together, we will then decide as parents when we're thinking of the whole family, what we have going on, what the outcome would be. Yeah. So we had to come to the other end of like, on some level, like our kids' emotions don't hold us hostage.
Yes.
So there's like the witness, but ultimately like our decision's not going to be based on what makes them happy or what like the input of just their emotions. And the kids don't love that. Sometimes they'll be like, but I'm so sad about going. We have our children, it's so different with different personalities too. So we're a pretty like communal family. We do like life with other people a lot and often. And when I'm building out our schedule or thinking about what I'm saying yes to, I purposely put things that are more interesting for my 11-year-old, 8-year-old, and 5-year-old, and then things that are more interesting for us. Like it's almost like well-rounded. Yeah. We're not just the parents that do the travel sports all year round, you know, or too bad, like this is our lives, we won't do anything. So I try to do it well-rounded. So in that, when my oldest is like, I don't want to go to that because they're your friends and then are not my friends, I know that I've built like, okay, you got some of that. That's true. And I'll say that. And if she gets or more escalated, I kind of think of it as like the boundary we have when one of our kiddos gets dysregulated. We'll talk about like you can feel an emotion. They know that's a value in our house. But if you make a mess through the emotion, that almost enacts like a different set of protocol.
Yes.
That until you come back to this range, like we would love to, do you want help? Like when they're dysregulated, we offer help. Again, different personalities. My youngest son with testosterone is like, I get punched when he's dysregulated. Fortunately, usually in the butt, you know, but I'll be like making dinner and I don't know what happened. And I just get like a couple whacks in the butt. And I'm like, what? Okay, angry child behind me. And then we'll talk about like, you seem angry. Remember, if you punch or scream or kick in your anger, like I'd love to hear about it. What's happening underneath it? With him, I've realized a lot of times it'll be explosive, but there's usually a softer emotion that covers his like. So it's usually shame. Like his sisters told him he did something wrong, either in a game or something, or sad because he feels slighted as the youngest. You know, all the things. But it always manifests as anger. Like that's easier when he's go-to. So then their consequence of like, hey, okay, like, I give him a chance, like almost like a bid for connection where I'm not following his emotional roller coaster. So knowing in my head, like, it's almost like assessing like, this seems like a level 8. And if in my brain 7 and above is dysregulation, I'm like, we'll see. I'm going to let him know if he'd like some help, but chances are he's just it's gas on the fire, not coming down, you know?
Do you want some help?
Yeah. Be like, hey, you sound angry. Are you angry? And then depending on if he's like, rah, and still kicking, because sometimes frankly, he's gone over and like to our breakfast table and just like whatever's on the table, just I'm like, okay. So then I pick him up and I was like, that's your answer. And then other times maybe he'll be like,
pick him up, then what do you
pick him up and I take him to his room and I'd be like, hey buddy, like I would love to help you. If you can find your words, I would totally help you. And I'll sit and give him a second, like maybe a little bit more, but I don't let him hit me or hit another sibling or yell like that. Ultimately, I'm like, hey, would you like some space? And I'm saying all these things. I used to expect that they would track, or if it was sinking in, or I needed them to recognize it for it to work, or like some kind of buy-in. I was like, nope, no buy-in. I'm going to like, here's what I'm putting on the table. If you want to pick it up or here, no problem. So then when he goes in his room, like, okay, if you'd like to talk to mommy about it, because he's 5, it's different than my 11-year-old. I'd love to hear you. And then I'll be kind of close because he usually doesn't stay in his room, or he comes back be like, oh, you ready to talk about it? Okay, no. Well, if you need to go back in your room, whatever. I know that I have to, it's a little more labor intensive for the 5-year-old.
So you will keep, basically it'll be like until you can manage your emotions.
And usually for him, it's just being able to talk.
Yes.
Yes.
So for him, like once he is, which is a very true. So what you're describing is he goes into his emotion center in his brain, which is his amygdala. It takes over and that shuts his executive function down, which is where he has his words. Machine. Yes. It's like, I will beat out my feelings. And so he actually has to get the blood flow back to being able to be in his executive function so that he can use words so that he's not damaging people.
Yes.
And you're like, and I think you offer to help him if you need to be held, or
would you like mommy to hug you as we're walking up, usually because there's time from whenever once I said like, hey, can you use your words to tell mommy what happened? And again, if it's words, then I'll hang in the kitchen. Like I don't have to remove them from whatever. If it's just more explosion, that's when and then on my way up, we're talking like, mommy would love to help you. Can you tell, like I make some more bids as I'm walking, like for like giving him like what he could tell. If you want care, do you want a hug? Yeah. Would you like to tell mommy? Are you super sad? And watching how he responds. And most of the time he's just so dysregulated that there's nothing. It's like, he's not there. He's out of the building.
So he's in his room. Then that is the boundary because what you are training him is what is healthy as an adult, which is we're allowed to feel our feelings. But as adults, we can't destroy other people or use our feelings as weapons or create chaos with them. Like that's not a healthy way. Some adults do. Yeah. But it's not a healthy way to relate, and it doesn't create healthy attachments with other people.
Yes.
What's also interesting is oftentimes when kids get into that dysregulated space, right? I watch parents also match that. And now they're modeling it, and the same thing. They're like, "Stop doing what you're doing!" And
Stop yelling!
Like, but you're yelling
so
now
real.
too.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of self-control to not go into that, because it's so dysregulating to have a kid freaking out, punching you, and stuff like that. But really, what it does, it's only going to exacerbate it. And then, like we were talking about, you have the parents that then just don't do anything about it at all, and it's like the kid gets to rule it. And I love how you're like, "I'm going to get present with this thing right here. And I'm going to actually establish some semblance of like, we can't do this, and I'll be with you, but also I'm not going to match you." And so how are you, this is where I'm curious, how are you managing yourself internally? How are you not going, because like I'm imagining someone repeatedly hitting me and me turning around being like, "I'm going to knock your head off if you hit me again." You know, like
yeah.
How are you, like, what are you doing?
Especially when you have a history of abuse.
Yeah, I have a history of experienced violence. Yeah. Like it's a massive trigger for me.
Yeah. So, and I know that you have a history where violence was involved. And so what has it been like for you to learn how to manage your own feelings?
I would say that for a while, as they get bigger, I actually would just went on a journey of being less, because they're like when they're younger and they don't have the words, so, you know, like the effort's not quite, you don't need to put in that, less effort than I am with my 11-year-old. It's more nuanced and long conversations. So when I used that period of time to actually be more curious about what was happening in me when they were getting triggered. So it was almost like the guinea pig stage where I'm like, oh, I'm feeling over, like, why do I want to match them? Why am I not able to keep it right here? Because I feel like this is evidence that I failed as a parent. I feel shame creeping up and telling me like, grab the controls because this is clearly you failed as your role of motherhood. So as I got better at like dismantling a lot of those motivations that pushed me to like, I'm powerless or I'm failing, I don't let I notice those. So probably now more quickly, I'm like, oh, if you were a better mom, he wouldn't have fought with his sister, or he'd be okay at losing better, at 5.
Totally.
You haven't taught him how to be a good loser yet. Like, come on, Jenna. And then all of a sudden we're battling about that. about my ability as a parent rather than me sitting with him in witness. So I just remind myself it's not about me. And if I need, so I've done a lot of work in that, but then if I need to do more work, the beautiful thing about
putting him in his room.
Well, I was going to say, and teenagers is they hit your buttons way more nuanced. So like my 11-year-old, we were like talking about why she needs to brush her hair. It's so funny, different alleys where she was like, she would just go like this and be like, it's fine. Where my 8-year-old's like
meticulous.
Yeah, she only wears rompers and she picks out her shoes the night before. And my 11-year-old's like, ugh. So anyways, we were having this conversation about her brushing her hair and she was like, why do you want me to brush your hair? And I was like, making dinner, couldn't really think of answers. And she goes, it's because you care what people think. That's the same reason you don't leave the house without makeup and you're always dressed up because you don't think people have a value for you if you're whatever. She just like sliced me. She can do that. So that is totally different on the buttons that it hits than getting punched in the butt, you know?
Yeah.
So there are a lot more moments with my 11-year-old that when I get triggered, I actually I feel it. Like it's almost like I can feel it coming out and
explosion inside.
Yes, wanting to match her or like address what she's saying. And I actually pause for a second and I like kind of think internally like, hey, you're going to need some attention afterwards, but we're not right now. You can be okay. We're not going to act through this, but you're probably going to need some care for that. And then frankly, with my 11-year-old, so I let it be about her in that moment. Cause like
this
when I
is
can
really
find,
good. Like the idea that you're having the conversation, like I'm actually going to get taken care of in this. And now is not the time.
And I'm not proving that belief or identity thing that's trying to say like her reaction's tied to that. I'm like, that's not true.
I'm not going to buy into what she's saying.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get hooked on what she's saying.
And we also think about like my husband and I, when we're doing conflict with each other, it's one person's turn to get care and then the other. And when you go back and forth, that's where it gets sloppy and messy. Yeah. So I'm like, this is about her right now. You're going to need some care in a second or later. No problem. Just right now, we're going to have it about her.
Which I want to just slow you down because what you said is a pretty profound thing is like, we've recognized that both people in situations need care. And we know that we are allowed to get care for both. And so when you know that there's an abundance of care, there's enough care for you to get your needs met and enough care for her to get her needs met, you don't have to have the battle in that moment over whose needs are going to get met. Because what happens in a lot of families is there isn't a commitment to we both get care. So when that situation happens, it's almost like care is the fork on the table and you both run to grab it. And then there's a battle over who gets it, who gets the care, who gets the attention, who gets to be seen, who gets to be heard.
Yeah.
And that battle is, I think, typically what most families are struggling with. And so the idea that you have of just like we've created a practice where both people get care automatically is bringing down anxiety for you, for you to even know I can get care after this, so I can give her care because it's not me or her.
That's so
most of us are in the battle of I get my needs met or she gets her needs met.
There's a winner and a loser.
Yes. And that's where
that's where it's high stakes.
Yes.
Because it's like there's one shot versus like, but I would say to clarify.
Well, I just want to say one last thing is the boundary is we both matter. Like that is a boundary that you've set and that boundary creates safety.
That's
what were you going to say?
I was going to say that with the care, I have I think getting really good, especially in parenthood, at knowing like she probably won't be able to give me the care. As she's gotten older, like my kids at different ages, I will like once so kind of think of it like this phase of dysregulation, there's different boundaries for that. Then we sit with the emotions and there's different boundaries around the emotions. And then what actually action steps we take. There's different like set of rules, but then the follow-up when they're regulated, when we have a bit of connection, frankly with my kids, it's way longer of a gap between when I circle back, especially with my two older girls, my 5-year-old, not as much, and let them know what was happening for me or what was hard for me about what they said. But in that gap, the longer gap, I let them have a chance to see how their reaction affected me without expecting to get necessarily care from them. Like I know that I can get care. I can get for myself. I can get care from the Lord, my husband. And there's been a couple times that I've, shout out to Jess Beard, gotten coaching sessions because I'm like, this thing is so triggering little Jenna. And in parenting, when my 11-year-old keeps saying this, like, can you help me work through it? So I'm like, I have a variety of care options.
Yes.
Even though it would be unrealistic to expect them to meet those.
Correct.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point. And I think that even in marriage,
Yes.
Justin doesn't meet all of my care needs, even from the things happening between me and him.
Yes.
Like I have to have friends and counselors, and there's a plethora of care and my own self-care. And I think that that's an important thing to know.
Yeah. And I appreciate that you want them to understand impact.
Yeah.
Because it would be very easy to be like, I know they can't give me care, so I'm just not going to let them see that they impact me. Where it's like, no, I am affectable and you are affecting me, because that's healthy for the long-term development of any human being. And it's like, no, there is actual impact.
I think that brings up a good question, because I get asked a lot. They're like, where is the emotional manipulation of you made mommy sad? Because a lot of people experience that in their childhood.
Right.
So putting the responsibility of mommy's emotions on you.
Yes.
So I think the differentiation for me, well, I didn't for a long time, like give them feedback about how, like again, dysregulation, care, witness, this is what we're going to do about it, a bit of connection, and then whatever the 50-cent version of feedback that a child can handle.
Yeah.
But when I wasn't doing that for a while, all of a sudden it dawned on me, because I do life coaching. I was like, I'm sitting with adults who never learned the feedback from their emotional disruptions.
Yes.
I actually started crying. I was like, this would be a disservice to my children if especially my 11-year-old, if she became a mom who responded like this and became a spouse who responded like, I don't want to do that to their future spouses. So out of this love, I care enough about figuring out what this balance is, so that you have some responsibility of this hurts. Because you guys work with adults all the time that you're like, oh, we never got that. Let's learn that when we're 11 together.
Yes.
So for me, what I think the difference with manipulation or putting too much on your kids is, again, having other sources of care, an awareness of that.
Right.
So it's not in a drowning them
I'm
out.
not needing you to fix me, which there's no manipulation then when we give feedback. It's not like I'm needing you to fix me. You're not my source.
Yep.
I do have a way to care for myself and get care. However, I am going to let you have an insight into my experience.
Yeah. And it's been so thinking of my 8-year-old, afterwards something happened. I'm like, hey, mom, I felt really sad. That happened yesterday afternoon or this morning. And she's like, yeah. And I was like, I'm not mad. I think we've done a good job figuring it out. I'm proud of you I'll probably do a bit of a hero sandwich where I'm like, you did this really well and I'm proud of blah, blah, blah. But it was really sad when you, kicked, I don't know, I can't think of one thing that she would do, but I was like, when you purposely ran away from me and weren't, and I was like, that was really sad, because you knew I had to go home and work. So by me having to follow you and chase you and you not listening, that actually made me late for work.
Yeah.
And that's how mommy actually makes the money to pay the bills. So it was sad for me, because I felt like you playing was what only thing that you were thinking about. It affects mommy and our whole family when I'm late for work.
Yeah.
And it was cool. And it's this shift of because I actually want children who understand
again,
their
shared
impact.
That without saying you made me.
Yeah.
You just shared, you were able to share, all that was without blame language.
And that's
you
huge.
shared your feelings without blame language, which I think is the difference between that manipulation and sharing impact.
I think, frankly, all the things that I do with my husband, I do with my children, because I'm like, okay, which it's hard to do. Sometimes because you think it's a different set of rules, or I'm not his, I don't know, helper, or I'm his helper, but I'm their parent, and discipline is shaping, all those things. But for me, it's so different of I totally forgot what I was saying.
Were you talking about how you learned it from your husband?
Oh, yeah.
And that's now what you're applying with your kids.
And even going in with curiosity, I made that mistake a lot with my 11-year-old. So when they're dysregulated, so the anger feels a little obvious. That was probably our first boundaries of this is what looking like a mess makes Then when we realized more recently with my 11-year-old and preteen hormones, okay, where is the boundaries in sadness? Because she could stomp on the ground and I'd be like, hey, okay, it sounds like you're making a mess. I'm sorry you're not happy we're doing this afternoon. We could talk about it, or if you're going to need space to go take a breath, no problem. You can go to your room to do that. And she'd be like, I'll never forget. She still does it. We were working through it, but she'll be like, this is what sadness looks like. You said there was room in this house for sadness, but now you're punishing me. I can't be around you if I'm sad. She's so
smart girl.
And I'm literally how do I parent this making peanut butter and jelly?
I made a monster.
Wait,
I made an emotional health genius monster.
It's so real. So then we had to come up with, like, my husband, I'm like, oh, just like we have rules. Oh, well, dysregulation looks like in anger and mess. This is what dysregulation looks like in sadness. And this,
and
this
what
is
are
happening,
some of the things? Like
stomping, repeatedly, like whining is what I would call it. But we kind of break out the nuance and say, like, repeatedly asking for the same thing. Because she'll get agitated and be like, I'm not whining, I'm mourning. Or something. I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, no problem. You can mourn in your bedroom. Like, so then she's not as angry or dysregulated as my son is. So I can talk to her. I'm like, I'd actually love to talk. Like I say, most of the time, I'm like, I'd love to talk about, like, give you care if you need, your heart needs some care, or if you want to talk about solutions. Like, I have some ideas too. If you're interested, let me know. But I think I used to like try to shove them down and be like, this isn't working. Instead, like open-handed, like reminder, these are here when you
have
your brain.
Care if you want it. I'll hug you. I'll hold you. I'll listen to you.
Literally
I'll
list
validate
those
you.
things while I'm
Which
talking
is
to her.
great because you're actually giving options. It's an empowerment process right there inside of that.
Or I can give you practical ideas of how to not, like, what if you did this, or we did this, or what if you made it fun like this? But you can't be throwing a fit like this.
While
I mean,
there,
I wouldn't call it throwing a fit if I was a parent, because if I was a kid, I'd hate that term. But like, you can't use your emotions in this dysregulated way.
And some of it, when they're like, if maybe there'll be times where she's smart enough where she'll be like, okay, give me your solutions. Prove to me you're not a mean mom. And I'm like, okay, not there yet. So then I'll say things like, oh, like, because it's true. I'm like, what's true? I'm like, I can't actually, my brain kind of glitches when someone's talking to me that loudly.
Yes.
So I'm not able to show up. Like, I want to, if you're able to find a normal voice, I'd love to show up for you. Like, more things about I know about
hold on,
nervous
let's
system.
just pause that. That's a great, because that's a boundary.
Yeah.
And a lot of boundaries are, and we've talked about this in this series, what can I give you? And how is the opportunity to give that? So you're like, I can give you a solution. I can't do it at this tone. But with the explanation of why. My brain is glitchy at this tone. I can't fully think through it. But I would be happy to think through it if you can talk to me in a way that is. And that is a great example of a kind and firm boundary where it teaches people. And that's not only you, that's humans. Most humans don't respond their best when someone's yelling at them.
But that's what's helpful with being like, oh, I'm not shutting down your emotions. I know enough about our nervous system now to know that this is unhelpful. And I think with my boundaries, especially in that moment of like, I care enough about you to be a mom that can show up undysregulated. And I'm not able to do that right now.
Right.
So I'm going to stay regulated. I think too, you asked about like, how do you not act through or match their energy? I almost feel like I put my hands in my ears when they're dysregulated and being like, yelling's happening, like analytical, like anger is happening, stomping. Okay, address the stomping.
So you name in your head what's happening.
I physically diagnose, be like, okay, there's anger. What's not working for me right now? There's anger by stomping. There's yelling. There's flailing. There's like throwing themselves on couches. Like,
which I want to pause you right there, because exactly what you're talking about is a great way to get your brain back online. Because what you're doing is you're pulling the blood from your emotion center to your executive function, which is out of the emotion back into I'm in control of my brain. And one of the ways we can do that is through logical thinking. So like one thing that parents can do with their kids if their kids are freaking out is they can say something absurd like, I can't believe that 2 + 2 = 7.
Yes, we do this.
And then kids will be like, 2 + 2 doesn't equal 7. What that's doing is it's pulling their blood back to their logic center. Or like, it's so crazy that the sky is red right now. And they're like, the sky's not red. But that is pulling them back to their executive function. So when you're looking at them and their behavior and you're like, you're actually practically narrating, they're stomping their feet right now. That is anger. This is what is happening. That just slowing it down in your brain. They say what you can name, you can tame. So as you can name it inside yourself, it begins to help you be more online and regulated.
That's so good. So I think as you're saying this, I realized I was like, what I think my boundary for myself is I don't like parent in dysregulation children. So I wait till we're both regulated and then listen for witness. I think it's Stephen Covey, his like the 7 principles. There's this one part where he talks about like people don't care to listen till they know that you were whatever. I'm just butchered it, but like
so they know
listen
how much
first.
You care?
Yes. That's it.
Yeah.
But he talked about how he did it with his son and how he talked all around the world doing it, but he realized he didn't do it with his kids because of the role difference. He's like, oh, it's my job to correct your logic. It's my job to point it out. And the idea is like, it's not my job. I'm going to do that. But your brain, all those things that are true, like you feel witness and care and you're listening because connection has happened, is totally different than sending the behavior adjustment message after the fact. So I think that for me was like, oh, we'll never get there. I just have to do this order. Dysregulation has to stop. Then witness and care. And then I get to parent of like, hey, so it doesn't actually work for us to be 5 minutes late from school, blah, blah, blah. We're going to need you to get up. What are some things we could figure out that gets you out of bed early? Yep, you're so tired. Do you think that's a nighttime? And then we go through strategy together where we collaborate because they're not dysregulated. She feels her emotions got some care. And then we moved more to like collaborative solutions. Frankly, though, with the collaborative solutions, I only ever give ones that work for me.
Yes.
But I'm not afraid of us brainstorming and be like, totally, that wouldn't work. But what about, and then I keep kind of like we talked about, I'm like, what can I give?
Right.
That it works for both of us. Yeah. So it's been really helpful to like shift the fear of, I'm missing my parenting moment. Give it now. And it's shocking to me how many times I actually listen with curiosity, the same courtesy I would do a friend. I'm like, oh, this is actually not about that part at school. This was feeling jaded on the playground by someone that got left out. And I'm like, oh, you actually just need witness. You're not going to, that behavior is not really as much the issue as them. Sorry.
I'm curious about something in this because like, I think there are parents that I've observed that aren't okay with their kids not being okay. They're like, oh, I don't want them to have to feel disappointed. I don't want them to have to be sad. And, you know, there's the other extreme of parents are like, I don't care what my kids feel, whatever, right? But somewhere you found this sense of balance that feels like I actually care about their emotions and I'm okay with certain things. How did you get okay with your kids? Because to draw these boundaries, you have to be okay with them not being okay in these things. How did you get there with that?
We have this phrase, which I think we were on a episode with y'all. Like it was one of the times we were doing, like trying to teach that dynamic between two siblings. And it was, they can be mad and it doesn't mean I'm bad. So I stopped associating their behavior with my success or failure as a human. And it didn't make it judgment anymore. I think of it as like emotions are like fireworks happening in everybody all the time. Whether or not they happen inside of someone does not mean that I went in there and was like, you know, like pow, stabbing them. Yes, something. So I'm like, so actually I think she's having an emotional reaction. And then sometimes when they have dramatic reactions, I'm starting to get dysregulated with their dysregulation. So for instance, my preteen not wanting to go to something that I planned specifically for her. That's the worst when it's like her best friend and she's like, yeah, I'm not ready to go. Yeah, I'm crafting right now. And I'm like, I don't want to go to your best friend's house like this. You know this is for you, right? Anyways, in that moment, I then am like, what's happening? She's feeling like, how do you feel or what happened? And I think like police report. I asked her to change direction in the middle of something she's enjoying when it's not her choice and she's really enjoying what she's doing. I actually don't enjoy that.
Police report,
I think just the facts, no blame. I think of it like a I don't know, a 1950s show detective. Facts, just the facts. Like keeping me honest in my account. So just the facts, because then I can experience like I think like, oh, have you ever experienced annoyance when you have to change tasks and you don't want to and you're really enjoying it? Yep. Yes. I get that feels like, and it helps me stop like dysregulation with them. And I'm like, I understand. It doesn't mean she gets to make a mess. Yep. It doesn't mean that maybe my behavior is going to shift or we're going to cancel that play date. But I also can understand in a way that I'm not, it disempowers my dysregulation. Yes. I'm like, yeah, I've experienced that before. That makes sense.
Well, and when you get to empathy, so when we're regulated, our relationship circuits are on. Oh. So when Audrey has that response and your immediate thing is, I'm doing this for you, you start to get dysregulated. When you do your police report and you come to compassion, like, oh, actually, I hate when I get interrupted in the middle of my thing. I can have empathy for that. That automatically helps your system begin to be more regulated and turn your relationship circuits back on. And when we set boundaries out of our relationship circuits being on, it's much more warm and inviting and easy to respond to than when we set boundaries when we're like pissed.
It's true because it's like you're the threat is usually the feeling it gets when you're pissed. I was going to say one thing that really shifted too is like in the knowing that they're going to be uncomfortable. Like I've gone on this own journey with habits where I've had to kind of reparent myself about doing things I don't like. Like I had lots of habits and the things I enjoyed, but the ones I didn't. So like I recognize like, oh, I get annoyed. I get stompy internally when that happens. I get blah, blah, blah. So then I anticipate like, you are having a human reaction. It is okay that you're having I know I stomped my way through the first 2 months of making my bed as well. Like, I get it.
Totally.
But then the flip side for me, the key with it is to not like, why my habits have taken root and longevity is because I tied them to my identity. They're not just tasks I'm crossing off my list. So I've actually tried that approach with some of the things that I know the kids are going to be uncomfortable or not enjoy, whether it's chores or things we're doing, like whatever. What I've realized, if I can cast vision for why this matters as who we are and who I want them to be and why it matters as like human, like how I will say the Zints. So for instance, like when we're cleaning the house, we have people over a lot and they'll be annoyed that I'm asking them to clean the house and like bummed and stomping and why am I dusting and why am I picking up my toys and these weren't even my toys. And then I'll just remind them like totally the Zints actually are thoughtful friends and we love having friends over. So one way we show thoughtfulness is we clean up our stuff and be like, but I don't want to. I'm like, I know, you know what? Mommy doesn't actually really want to either. Yeah. But it's who we are. So this is like what we do. So like way more, I'm not interested in mindless robots of obedience.
Right.
I actually want to create people who understand their actions reflect who we are as people. And then that's where they have buy-in. And then it's so cool sometimes hearing them be like, yeah, the Zints like help each other. Because this summer we really went on, like I kind of pick one attribute for family culture I want to like work out every summer. Because my margin as a working mom, I don't have a lot of capacity to be like, I don't know. I'm not a farm sitting mom who's with their children all the time. It's not me. So then every summer I'm like, what are we going after? And this summer it was like, we all help and carry the load, like understand the cost of running the family together. So it's not your job or my job. And that's not fair. It's like collaboration. So it's been really cool in that when it circles back to like, I don't want to buy, I don't remember the Zins help each other because we care what's on your plate when I have less on my plate. And that's my time to hop in. So that's been really helpful. And then I would say the other thing that has helpful, like casting almost like visions for the boundaries is what I would say, like tying the actions into identity stuff. But then the other thing I would say that has been really helpful is slowing down. Where parenting like this way versus just obedience or ignoring are quicker routes because you either shut it down.
Quicker in the short term.
Yes.
Because it might be quicker in that one moment, but it's much longer in the amount of moments that behavior continues to overtake
Agreed.
things.
And it like manifests into dysfunctions you don't want. Then you have to deal with those. It's almost like when your check engine light comes on and you don't deal with it, you're going to have problems in the future for yourself. It's going to be a bigger bill.
But for that one drive, it's quicker.
Yeah, to just get there. So realizing like there is this line. Have you guys read Ruthless Elimination of Hurry?
I haven't yet. I know of it.
It's so good. But he just says like at one point, who of us are our best selves when we're in a hurry, when we're prioritizing whatever busy next thing we have? Do you ever show up as your best self parenting your child?
Yes.
Or do you actually just try to quiet it so that you're not late to the next thing? And I realized how often I missed moments to parent differently. And I would take the shortcut of the ignore or silence without like some of the withness. And then realizing like, actually, I care enough. I had to sit with like, I think I want to make a choice that if it gets to this level and I try my things and I actually need to pause in the franticness of out the door to actually give you my undivided attention to parent it, I'm okay with being late now because I know that this is actually more important in the long run. Right. And I had to sit with some of the like, people are going to think you're, you flaky, or you don't care, flaky, or the anxiousness or the mad at them for blaming. But I actually decided internally, like it's not their fault. I'm not going to blame them for being late. I made a powerful choice to stop so that I could parent this in a way that I'm proud of. And I know that leads to like long term. So then when I'm late, I'm not mad at them. I'm not like adding blame to them, but I also like, I'm proud, honestly. Even if I'm late, I'm like, I'm proud that I chose the more important thing to show up well, because that's going to be my lasting dividends, not this play date that I'm 5 minutes late for.
Because this conversation is also about priority. Like I am letting the people know that if I am late, it's not because I'm flaky. It's because I have certain priorities. And my priority, first and foremost, is to be a parent that shows up in this way. And this is my value system for
Which
that.
is another boundary that you're setting.
You're
setting a boundary to protect what matters to you.
Because it takes a little longer to parent this way.
Yes.
But I would say that because people all the time like, that takes so long. I think that's probably why I added that in there. Is they're like, it's so much longer than just ignoring or shutting up. I'm like, totally. But I think what I found, I would say, is when you stick with it, you get there faster. So maybe what took 30 minutes now takes 5, or they know where this is headed. There's something about consistency that you're not reinventing the wheel, that the kids know, I'm going to be up in my room, so I'm going to self-manage because I know where this goes, versus the like inconsistency. So it does pay off, and it does not take as long when it becomes like your culture.
I mean, I think
I want to circle back. Let me circle back on this so I don't miss this. You said earlier on the first half of that, you were talking about the why. You're having the conversation where you're elaborating, this is who we are. This is our value system. And I didn't want to miss out on this because I think a lot of experiences, I know growing up, I didn't hear a why. Like, I understand kids will be like, why? And parents are like, just do it. Do it. We do not have the time for this, right? Like, I understand that there's really difficult things that happen. However, building in that why, like I didn't buy into a lot of stuff. So I was middle finger up at a lot of things, whether it was in school or it was within the home, because it's just like, you just are telling me I have to do this. And the long term, like I didn't understand long-term values for certain decisions, right? I was, and so to me, like you pausing to be like, I'm going to tell you the why, you get the buy-in. Because all of a sudden it creates a value system. It creates understanding. It creates connection. And the kid goes, all right, whether or not I agree with this, I understand this. And this is who we are. And this is why we do this. So this is unto something. And so I think that that's really powerful. And again, it costs you something. It costs you that time and that attention. And it costs you letting go of the agenda of what you think your time is supposed to look like or how something is supposed to go. But the long-term payout on that is massive.
Yeah. That's and so if we talk even just about quality of life, you deciding I'm going to take longer, what that actually does is for your insides, it now begins to be like, I don't have to feel this anxiety when something's going on because I've already decided if I need to take time, I will. Yeah. And so because the pace of hustle is just regulated.
Yes.
Yeah.
And in order to get, I laugh because I've been talking to our students in our school about how like if you listen to podcasts and everything at 2 speed, you're actually keeping your nervous system in dysregulation. Now, there are certain times I do that because I have to get through content really fast for something. So there's human things, but I actually try to keep things at a much slower, like not a slower pace. My brain is very fast. I have ADD. I try to keep things not at a manic pace because a slower pace is more regulated. So when you're actually like, instead of always hurrying to shut them up or just like, I don't care because I got to go, the slowness, it might feel different, but it also is good for your own soul and body. It's true. Like, it's a gift to your own self to let go of the hurry. So I often think about things like kids are a gift to help us let go of those moments of the hurry so that we can slow down.
And then I think even I have to do the care afterwards in the car where I start to feel shame or guilt about being late. And then I remind myself, I'm like, hey, you actually made what? That's true. You're going to be late. What else? What else is true? You chose to prioritize showing up for your kids. I was like, that's actually a powerful choice. I really respect that. So I think we can be okay that we're late because we chose. Like I have to almost remind myself instantly. But then the cool part of it, like, so I was going to circle back. So when I give my kids the feedback, sometimes my older daughter will get more info because her words cut a little deeper and she's better at it. So when I give her a little more info, she's also more anxious leaning and guilt reading. Like she's kind of, I call it, I have this own cycle that I've been rocking out of called my shame spiral.
Yes.
So someone tells me I hurt them and I'm like, if I'm not just, like if I'm not in fight mode, I like spin out. I'm like, I'm sorry, I should have. So she does that. So for a while, I stopped giving her feedback because I was like,
I don't want her to go into shame
I don't
spiral,
want her to own
so
this
I don't
so much
want to
heavier.
tell her.
Exactly.
Yes.
But then I had the awareness of like, wait a minute. If someone had sat with me and taught me how to not shame spiral and spoke truth when I was losing it, like I wouldn't be figuring this out as an adult.
Totally.
So now when she does it, I wait to give her the feedback until I can have care because I know it's going to happen. Like I can have the time to do it.
I have to have the capacity to be able to share how you impacted me and then have the time and care to help you through that.
Yes. Yep.
That's
so
good.
then she'll be like, but I'm so sorry, Mom. You're right. You're doing all these things. It's crazy that if I like I said, dysregulation, witness, solutions together, and then a bit of space, how differently she'll show up if I try to I could never get her to that soft spot of repentance, like in the moment. But then also so then I'm like, hey, and I pause. I'm like, oh, you're being so kind right now. You're actually not wrong or bad. Mom is just sharing. This isn't your fault. I'm not mad. You don't have to apologize. And then she calms down because she literally gets almost dysregulated in the shame and gets going faster and just I'm the worst daughter, things that I would be so sad. And then she'll pause, man, we've pulled over on the side of the road so many times to be like, hey, because Mommy was sad. This
doesn't mean you're bad.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just letting you know what happened.
I can be sad. It doesn't mean you're bad.
I've forgiven you.
Mad, it doesn't mean you're bad.
Or if she's ever like, you're the worst mom ever. I was like, that hurts my heart. She goes, I know it's just anger. I'm like, totally. Even when we say things in anger, it still cuts the other person that says it.
Yes.
And her being like, yeah, I can see that. Okay. Or yeah. So it's just helpful. Or sometimes if one of the other siblings is in the room when somebody loses it and after they're in their space or whatever, I'll purposely talk through a little bit of do you ever know what it feels like to be angry, or when was the last time? So not making them the child that's out of the room, the scapegoat, but helping the other child empathize and be like, oh, that's what it looks like when I, say I'm sad, but I'm actually whining and throwing a fit and stomping. And so it's just a few of the tactics we've been doing.
Tell me about, let's go full circle on a couple of the stories that you started. So you started with your daughter says that you have to make things look good because you care. And how did that play out? Tell us exactly the steps through that journey.
That one, I realized because as they get older, they get sneakier. And I was like, she actually is just mad and using different techniques to try to not have to brush her hair. I'm not going to fall for the bait of
you
the
little
character
manipulator.
attacks. Yeah. I mean, if you can do this with your kids, you'll actually be able to do it with that coworker that keeps dysregulating you too.
That's true.
So anyways, I was like, oh, you really don't want to brush your hair. Okay. And I was like, she was like, what else? Tell me the good reason. I was like, I think at that point I didn't have answers. She'll ask me, she'll stump me a lot in the moment. And I used to feel I'd get dysregulated because I'd be baited into proving my defense. I'm like, I actually don't have to prove to you. So I'll say you know what? I'm going to look into it. I know there's a lot of answers outside of vanity because you're right. We don't have a culture where I would make you do something for vanity's sake.
Yes.
But there are some health benefits that offhand I don't remember. And she'd be like, pressure and stomping. And then I would go back to maybe that one's a little unique because we do have to go to school, maybe a bit more of a timeline. So I will be like, you don't have to brush your hair. I won't be able to drop you off if you don't brush your hair. You can I'm going to bring the hairbrush in the car. I'm going to leave in about 5 minutes. Or and then maybe I'll set an alarm because we have Alexas. Alexas are wonderful. They help you all the time with holding the boundary so that you don't, ADD self doesn't forget.
Yes.
Or that I'm not the bad guy or I'm not yelling or it's been 5 minutes because that's dysregulating even if you're not.
Yep.
So Alexa gets those jobs.
Love
and
that.
then I'm like, I'll be in the car with the brush loading your siblings in. Let me know. I'll be leaving in 5 minutes because it wouldn't be fair for them to be late. But you can totally brush your hair in the car. Or here's the brush. And then sometimes.
And what if she decides she doesn't brush her hair? Are you going to not take her to school then?
That's a great question. She's never not done it. She doesn't want to get left. So she gets in the car. And then usually we have a 15-minute drive. We can get to the spot where she calms down enough that she doesn't. We had that she'll then brush it because she wants, she was like, okay, it's not that big deal at 4 or 5. I then at that point maybe would lower my standard. I want to accept. Yeah. Where maybe if she wasn't dysregulated, I'd be like, hey, you got it crazy. But if she does sometimes I'll tell them hey, just 10, I'll tell her what
10
brushes.
brushes.
Yeah. In those moments when she's dysregulated, I'm like 10 brushes and you can be done. Let me know. And then she misses the whole spot. Be like, she did 10. That's it. That's a win right there. There's other times she actually is learning Mandarin and she was really hating Mandarin homework because it is ridiculously tedious.
Yes.
With all the strokes, they make them pick up a different color per stroke, per character. And I'm like, I actually would not enjoy it too. So we had lots of conversations about homework for a while. And then finally we're like, we are not going to make you do your homework. If you don't do your homework, this will happen. you'll get this grade. Eventually, on the report card, you'll probably get an F in homework, which would bring down your A that you get to probably about a C. And then she got that. Like, she did it. And we'd remind her. I'd have these daily reminders like, all right, I'd love for you to do your homework. Are you going to do your Mandarin homework this week or today or whatever? And then it's sour. And then she got the first interim with a F and a C, and she bawled. And it was beautiful to be like, this is why I'm letting you feel your consequences.
Yes.
Your report
So
cards
good.
are your interims, the bad guy, not me.
Yes.
But I had to let go of this thing because I was an all A student my entire life, because that was part of like our core value, and it served me well. Like, there's obviously tons of benefits from doing well from school. But realizing like I couldn't get dysregulated, or that was a boundary of like, ooh, when I push it through to completion with her homework, I'm dysregulated. She's dysregulated. I haven't solved this yet. Therefore,
totally,
homework is not worth this constant disconnect that we're experiencing. Like, she can actually, there's built-in consequences that I'll let her feel. So then she started doing it more. And then we've chatted through this summer, like, okay, what is it going to look like? How are we doing it different this year? Like, we put like strategizing. She has like colored pencils, I think even at the end of the year, in the car so that she can do it on the way home. Hey, what if once you did 2 pages, I'll let you do the last page while you're watching a show? Like, because it's so mindless. I'm like, I'm not caring. I want to be on your team.
Totally.
And that's what we say a lot with solutions, because like, she's so mad. I'm like, I would love to be on your team. If you want to be on my team, that's probably one of the things I say the most. Like, let me know.
Yes.
Like, because it's a choice of like, I don't have my guns raised, but I can't like, unless you're choosing to buy into this solution thing, that it won't work. So
I love the language that you keep using about being on a team and collaborating and all of that, because it doesn't say you're over there on an island and I'm over here. It says we are together, and you never have to be alone inside of this. You can come choose out of aloneness. You can choose into connection at all times. And also there's something that can feel so overwhelming about like, oh, I have to do this on my own. But again, the idea of like, oh, but if we're a team, there's somewhere to go to. You're just building what I'm trying to verbally process is I'm looking at the long term, and I'm like, oh, kids long term with that type of mindset are able to feel very empowered, because they're like, oh, everything is collaborative. Everything is a team.
It's so true. Even in their homework, I watch them like come and like, or at school, try to be like with the teacher, collaborate. And she said no. And I was like, oh gosh, it's hilarious how much they have expectation. But then the flip side is how many times they've said yes. Like, she's in 4th grade last year, and she's gotten a couple teachers to sponsor clubs she wanted to make because she didn't have one. And she was like, there's a need. And then she got special permission to bring in these things because she realizes like adults.
I'm allowed to have a voice, and adults want to help me.
Yeah. It's been
powerful.
Cool. And even it's hilarious thinking about how some of the tapes have played out, where she's dysregulated in her room, and then she comes out and she's like, I'm ready for your solutions. And like sad, not mad. And then she like hugs me, and then I just sit there and I don't do you're right. I don't ever gloat or boast. That's been a really big thing for me.
So here's the other thing. You're talking about boundaries on yourself as much as boundaries with your kids.
Yep.
So like, you have created lines to protect your core values. I'm not going to boast. I'm not going to gloat, because your core value is connection. And you're like, the boundary ultimately helps you become who you want to be by doing that. So, okay. So you're like, I won't boast. I won't gloat.
Yeah. So I just give her a hug, like, babe. And then like, I want to be on your team. And she's like, I want to be on your team too. And I'm like, okay. And then you asked, because there are times with like some of my childhood stuff when she'll get real mean in the middle of things. And I'll like be like, I'll have to shut the door and be like, hey, because she'll leave it open. She's like, I'm in my room. And you're like, totally. And then I have had to go back and circle back, with the space. And usually I would say that often it's alone. So like maybe at night in bed, because we'll lay with our kids and have some of these like more in-depth conversations. But I'll be like, hey, like sometimes when you are unkind to mommy, when you're upset and mad, it hits some spots in mommy that was like how some of mommy's parents were. So it's really hard for me to stay, and I want to be on your team so bad. But when you say unkind things, mommy like kind of draws back like a turtle in her shell, and I don't want to do that. Do you think like, and then it's been beautiful to then actually, because we've talked through a bit like 10-year-old appropriate, some of my childhood pain, but then has chosen into relationship with both grandparents, aware, and then we'll process sometimes in real time, like when we're visiting, like, that was a little harsher from that grandparent. Is that how you experienced it when you were growing up? Like and then we'll talk about the differences, but I think, I feel a little teary. I think what's been beautiful is I think we've done it well enough that they have not become the villain, because she'll ask, like, why would a parent ever say unkind things about you? And I was like, well, it was her own pain that she was talking about it. And now that she's like, she doesn't talk like that anymore. I was like, she's like, Jesus and her have healed a lot, and she's a really different person. Because then they would say, like, why do we keep going to visit? I'm like, oh, no, they're not the same. And we're going to give her a chance. We've had to have some different boundaries. And they understand, like, we're doing this with the person that has been in pain, it has caused us, but we're going to try. And then there's adjustments. Like if sometimes my mom has crossed different boundaries of how she's talked about it. And I've like, hey, like I've actually pulled my mom aside. I'm like, hey, this feels really scary and sad. And my mom has responded so beautifully. When I've pulled her out, because I'm not going to do it in front of my kids, but that little part of me that wanted to like go protect, be like, we will not talk to my kids how I was talked to.
Totally.
And then I'm like, hey, like, okay, you are 35. Your mom's a different person. Go give her a chance before your scared self overreacts, and watch the kids then decide grandma's unsafe. Like, let's give grandma a chance. So like pulled her out, and then like, hey, like I'm wondering what's happening. And I remember this one incident was my mom's a former teacher, and she would bring art projects to do with the kids, which is beautiful and thoughtful. But when they wouldn't do them well, it would be really triggering for her. And I'm so then being like asking her and getting curious what's happening. And then her feeling sad, realizing like her gruffness was coming out of she didn't feel appreciated. And she'd been imagining doing this with them for 2 months. So then sitting with her, I'm like, okay, do you want to stop it? Or do you think there's room for them to paint it a little differently than how you expect? And talking her through. And then I remember, I think it was Audrey at that point, like needing some repairs. So then mom went and sat a little bit, and then I talked to her, and she was a little scared. But then we talked through, like, I think grandma was sad that you're listening to how she was trying to help you paint it. She goes, that makes sense. I felt scared. I'm like, okay, let's go tell grandma you felt scared.
Wow.
And then walking you through, like, because I know that my mom needed the care first. Like, she wouldn't have been able to hear, like, I don't think most people would, feedback. And then her telling my mom that it felt scary.
Can I just pause you really quick? Again, the care before feedback is a great concept, because we want people to hear the feedback before we soften and meet them. But the best way for people to hear the feedback is after they've gotten care.
And I don't think, like, you're going back to that, I don't think I could do that until I got really good about getting care from the Lord and myself before I could go to the person. Yes. When I go to them bankrupt or don't have any, like, I'm at negative, there's no room for them to be a human or have margin.
Absolutely.
So I'm like, me getting a little bit and be like, okay, and then bringing it back. So anyways, then Audrey told my mom that it felt scary to have her be harsher about the project. And my mom like apologized, and they hugged. And then we all went back in the room and we finished the art project. And then the art project was in our like garage for years. And it was just it felt like this milestone of like, oh, this is why we're doing it differently. And we're not just raising kids that are going to do differently and who have adult relationships that are different. We're preparing generational things. Like, this is what's possible if you're willing to risk a little bit. Because I think sometimes when we don't feel safe, we don't go back. Even if we've changed, we don't let there be attempts at repair for everyone to show up differently. Yeah. But be like, I could be okay. Let's try this. Let's see what happens. That's just been profound. So anyways, that's some of the, when we talk about with the kids, the feedback, I'll explain
how it impacts you. Mm-hmm. Well, I love one of the things that you explained, and we've had other stories that you've told that have kind of brought this up, is like the idea of when you're yelling or hitting, it makes me want to protect myself and recoil, or it makes me feel a little bit scared, and I want to be able to be with you like that. I want to be able to run towards you. But when you talk to me and you're mean, then it feels really hard for me to want to it feels harder for me to want to come close. I think this is a concept that most humans are never taught. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We learned that when we throw fits, we get what we want. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so what happens, I'm reparenting this in myself in the past few years, where I will realize I will want to lash out or blame Justin to get my needs met if I don't feel like they're getting met. And I'm like, once this concept happened, I was like, it's illogical that he would ever want to come near me and give me compassion and kindness while I'm stabbing him.
Yes.
Like that's illogical.
We actually have a phrase, we call it hugging a porcupine.
Yes.
I want to give you a hug, but it's like hugging a porcupine right now.
100%. But we genuinely believe, like that's what I learned from my childhood though, was that the way to get my needs met is to like have the emotional fireworks and porcupine out.
Yeah.
And so when you give the feedback of the way that you're impacting me makes me want to recoil, but I really do want to come close. That is helping their brains start to create a connection that is vital in relationships. Because now in relationships, when I want care or I want him to hear me, then I have to come without blame. I have to come without stabbing him.
Yep.
I have to come without being dysregulated because I'm now taking ownership inside of me that the way I approach things affects how easy it is for him to want to lean in with love.
That's so good. That's one of the things I love. I've said it before, but we've worked with some of the people who have done your courses because we do marriage coaching too. And they get these concepts for themselves. So they then do it in friendships or whatever relationships in their life. Then they bring that into marriage. And like we said, then they bring that same like system into parenthood. And I'm like, oh, it's profound. What parents do we know that showed up with ownership while parenting and be like, oh, I think it's humility, pride sometimes, but I think it's misapplying like what it means to lead. I'm like, totally, I'm going to be in charge, but I don't have to do it that way where I'm usurping my control. I actually would rather teach and shape you so that we're on this journey together than me like dragging you along,
As I know we got to wrap this up. But I am curious if parents are listening that they hear this and they go, this sounds foreign to me.
She
crazy.
And they're thinking about, all the messiness of their own lives. And they're like, I can't even imagine being regulated, responding to my kids. Do you have an idea of where someone might start? Like, where would they begin the process?
Offensively. I always tease with habits. I'm like, little bits better. Let's go for small. Because we try these overhauls and then you can't.
Yeah.
Or you get overwhelmed.
You get overwhelmed.
Like, I don't know where to start.
You give up.
So I would say kind of in line, my starting spot would be the ownership and regulation of yourself before you parent. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but I was like, you can't parent well when you're dysregulated. So actually going internal and be like, what's happening in me? What beliefs are coming up by their action? And then like maybe even logically being like, what actions are happening? So actually getting practiced about going inward before you go outward.
So self-awareness.
Self-awareness first.
Well, and this is, I love that you're bringing it up. We're going to teach on this in the Boundaries Conference, which is the whole goal is the way you learn boundaries is to understand your nervous system.
Yeah.
Your nervous system is one of the best ways to explore what you need and then how to create a life that takes care of you and others because of that. So I love that. The other thing that I'm going to add, you might have another step, but I'm going to add one. One thing that you did that I think dramatically impacted your life is you implemented habits. And we were having this conversation before this podcast about how with habits you learned I need to be able to feel my feelings and then I also need to be able to make choices that don't always necessarily align with my feelings. Like you just did a post recently about how your house is clean now and it used to not be clean. And I was like, I remember that 100%. But the idea was like you recognized your feelings about it. You were able to process through the beliefs you needed to change. And then you were able to implement small changes that then created big impact. And I think that just the concept of habits, small changes, I've sent most of my friends who felt out of control as parents to your habit course because I'm like, your habit course is how you get transformation. It's at small, itty bitty, this is doable pace.
And I love it when you said at one point, like when you do the inside work, there should be shifts externally that match the health. Like I always think about them being a feedback loop. When your beliefs shift, what you believe to be true is evident in what you can see around you in your behaviors, because your behaviors are manifestations of your beliefs. So then changing your behaviors and your beliefs at the same time is where like lasting change. Yes. So I was shocked that like the reason I wasn't, when I actually did some work, I wasn't keeping my house clean, was beliefs, like related to beliefs.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, but like they're so correlated. Yeah. That's why I'd say with parenting too, like what beliefs do you, like, I think for me, that was a big shift in like, I believed parenting was more about control than connection and that I could actually shape children. I could discipline children. I could teach children out of connection versus out of control. So when that belief shift, then the options of habits that could fall under that umbrella was way different than control being my goal and the action steps that might follow that.
Yeah.
So good.
I love it.
I love when you're on.
Oh,
I enjoy
love
it.
having you guys. I mean,
Yeah.
having you
I love
guys.
having you guys. I love having you
Thank you
guys
for letting
on
us
your
join you on the
podcast.
Connected Life. This is so fun,
Yeah.
Jenna. Thanks so
I
much.
just like being with you. I think was what I was
me
going
too.
for.
I always feel like it's friend hangout.
Yeah.
If you guys want to find Jenna, you can find her on Instagram.
At Jenna Zint on Instagram. And then my Habit Lab is actually starting. I don't know when you're listening to this, but it'll be live often. So go to thehabitlab.org. It's actually launching. Registration will be open in September 2024. But if it's later, thehabitlab.org.
Wonderful.
That's
Love
awesome.
that.
Thanks, guys.
It'll change your lives.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else you want to say?
I want to go.
Okay.
Make it better.
Make it better.
I don't know what that was.
I do want to say that one thing that the concept that I'm going to take from this podcast that really stuck was that emotions are like fireworks.
Yeah.
I was like,
good.
that is and you just never know when they're going to go off and what's going to set them off. They're like fireworks that are just endlessly in there that anything could trip them off.
But you know, the thing that's accurate about fireworks too is it goes away quickly.
Yes.
Versus, I think people feel overwhelmed. They're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. You're like,
how long is this going to last?
Yeah.
No, it's just a quick fireworks show.
Yeah.
I'm great at sound effects, clearly.
Yeah, it's not a Northern California fire. It is fireworks.
That's
It's
good.
not going to blaze for weeks on end and destroy
true.
everything. Anyways, thanks for joining us. We're going.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.